The story of the USS Indianapolis, CA-35. She was named after the city of Indianapolis, Indiana. She would be ordered on February 13, 1929, at a contract cost of $10,903,200. She would be built at the New York Shipbuilding Corporation shipyards in Camden, New Jersey, and her keel would be laid down on March 31, 1930. The USS Indianapolis would be launched on November 7, 1931, and Indianapolis was commissioned on November 15, 1932. Her displacement would be 10,110 standard tons. Her code letters would be named NABD. Her overall length would be 610 feet 3 inches, and her beam would be 66 feet 1 inch, and her draft would be 24 feet with a maximum load. She would be propelled by 4 screws powered by 4 Parson reduction steam turbines. These would be powered by 8 White Forster boilers. She had 107,000 standard horsepower and generated 80,000 kilowatts. The Indianapolis would be a situational mid-range sharpshooter. She'd be a Portland-class treaty cruiser. The ship was built shortly after the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty. The Indianapolis possessed the ability to be set up as a flagship of the fleet with facilities that would accommodate the admiral as well as his staff. In fact, the USS Indianapolis would serve as flagship of the 5th Fleet in the Pacific Theater. Her top speed would be 32.5 knots. She had a turning circle radius of 620 meters. Her complement was 95 officers and 857 enlisted men, or 1,269 total in wartime. She would later be commanded by Charles B. McVay. Speaking of Captain McVay, it is worth noting his story. Charles McVay is most known in U.S. naval history for captaining the USS Indianapolis, CA-35, when 2 Japanese torpedoes from the submarine I-58 struck and sunk her on July 30, 1945. Survivors of the sinking drifted unknown in the Philippine Sea for 4 days. 880 sailors out of a crew of 1,196 were lost. The loss of the Indianapolis and the failure of the Navy to recognize its non-arrival in port remains one of the most tragic episodes in U.S. naval history. Captain McVay was court-martialed in the aftermath of the sinking and found guilty of recklessly endangering his crew by failing to zigzag. In spite of I-58 Captain Mochitsura Hashimoto's testimony at the trial stating that such maneuvers would not have changed the outcome of his attack, the conviction effectively ruined McVay's career. It was controversial at the time and remains so today. McVay had a distinguished naval career prior to the loss of the Indianapolis. He served as an executive officer of the USS Cleveland, CL-55, during the North African landings in November of 1942 and earned a Silver Star for his actions aboard the same ship in the Solomon Islands in March of 1943. From May 43 to October of 1944, McVay chaired the Joint Intelligence Staff in Washington, D.C. He took command of the Indianapolis on the 18th of November, 1944. Under his command, Indianapolis participated in attacks in Iwo Jima, Tokyo, and was critically damaged by a kamikaze in a pre-invasion of Okinawa. After refitting at Mare Island, California, Indianapolis delivered the components of the atomic bomb to Tinian. She was struck on her side and then returned to the Pacific Theater for the staging of the invasion of the mainland of Japan. Following this mission, McVay died on November 6 of 1968. Secretary of Navy Gordon England ordered that a letter expressing congressional exoneration of McVay be placed in his official file in 2001. The armament of the USS Indianapolis was as follows. The main battery of guns would be 9 8-inch 203mm Mark 14s Mod 1 55 caliber guns. These guns would have a range of 15 kilometers. The reload time for them would be 14.3 seconds. It would take 30 seconds for the guns to turn 180 degrees. Secondary armament would be 8 5-inch 127mm Mark 19 Mod 6 25 caliber guns. These guns would have a range of 4.5 kilometers with a reload time of 4.5 seconds. The USS Indianapolis would also be armed with 16 20mm Oerlikon Mark 20 guns with firing range of 2 kilometers. She also had 24 40mm Bofors Mark guns with a firing range of 3.5 kilometers. Lastly, she had 2 3-pounder 1.9-inch 47mm saluting guns. The ship's armor plating would include a belt thickness of 83 to 127 millimeters, the deck plating of 64 millimeters, the barbettes 38 millimeters, the turrets 38 to 64 millimeters, and the conning tower with a thickness of 32 millimeters. The USS Indianapolis would be equipped with 2 midship catapults and 4 float planes. However, during her final refit in 1945, she would be reduced to having 1 midship catapult and 3 floating seaplanes. This final refit would be completed at Mare Island Navy Yard, California, and was finished on July 10, 1945. In a secret mission to the Northern Mariana Islands, the Indianapolis would carry cargo so classified that it would be under constant guard. These components would be used in the construction of Little Boy, which would be one of the atomic bombs used over Japan, this one over Hiroshima. The mission would be completed on July 26 of 1945, and she would then prepare to set sail to the Philippines to participate in Operation Downfall. Captain McVeigh would request a destroyer escort as a precautionary measure in Japanese-infested waters. The request would be denied as he would be told that the sector did not pose a threat. Then, just after midnight on July 30th of 1945, the USS Indianapolis would be unaware of an enemy submarine presence. Japanese submarine I-58 would be under the command of Mochitsuda Hashimoto. This would be Hashimoto's 4th command. I-58 would fire 6 Type 95 torpedoes. 2 would strike the Indianapolis, 1 amidship and the other at the starboard bow. The explosions would rock the ship, and it would immediately start taking on water. As the ship flooded, the crew had no choice but to abandon ship. In less than 15 minutes, the USS Indianapolis would slip beneath the surface of the water and disappear. Almost 300 men would go down with her. The sun would rise to reveal nearly 800 men in the water. With land more than 280 miles away, these men were forced to wait for rescue. Exposure, exhaustion, and dehydration would start to take their tolls on the surviving men. But these factors was not the only threat the men would face. Below the surface, the hungry sharks would also take their toll. Specifically, oceanic whitetips would attack the groups of men. These sharks would number in the hundreds. After nearly 4 days, a Navy patrol plane would spot an oil slick. Upon investigation, a pilot would spot the drifting men and radio for help to arrive. When the USS Indianapolis sank, nearly 800 men went into the water. When the rescue ship arrived to save them, only 317 survivors were rescued. This tragic loss of life was the single largest ship loss of life in U.S. naval history. Unfortunately, it is also the largest recorded shark attack in history as well. In the days that followed, nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which would lead to the surrender of Japan, thus ending the war in the Pacific. It was later revealed that the U.S. intel did not fully properly communicate the dangers of the enemy submarine presence in the area. Also, 2 naval officers were informed of the disappearance of the Indianapolis, but failed to investigate or to report it to their superiors. Looking to put blame on the loss of the ship and crew, the Navy would court-martial Captain McVeigh in November of 1945. In defense of McVeigh, the Japanese submarine I-58 Captain Hashimoto would be called in to testify. He stated that there would have been no tactic used that would have saved the vessel that led to the loss of the crew. Despite his testimony, McVeigh would be court-martialed. He would be the only captain in history to be court-martialed for the loss of his vessel. Sadly, Charles McVeigh would commit suicide in November of 1968. On August 17, 2017, 72 years after the USS Indianapolis sank, she would be found. She lies at the bottom of the Philippine Sea. The ship rests 18,044 feet below the surface of the water. This depth makes the Indianapolis one of the world's deepest lost ships to be located. The wreck site has been designated as a military war grave, and the exact location is classified. From firing on Japanese forces at Chihuahua, to shooting down torpedo planes in the Philippine Sea, to escorting the marine landings at Iwo Jima, the USS Indianapolis would accumulate 10 battle stars. She was instrumental in operations that led to the surrender of Japan. The tragic story of the ship, her crew, as well as her captain echoes to this day. In 2001, Captain McVeigh's court-martial verdict would be overturned. Too little, too late, perhaps, but Captain McVeigh's name and career had been cleared. World War II would come to a close after the surrender of Germany, and we are eternally grateful for the crew's sacrifice aboard the USS Indianapolis.